Welcome to the Community Partners for Affordable Housing's first Housing Forum. So, Community Partners for Affordable Housing, we do 5 things. We develop affordable housing, we manage it into the future, we provide resident services directly, and also through connecting our residents to services in the community. We provide services to people who are houseless, and we also engage and participate in the communities that we serve, and that is what we're doing this evening, and we're really happy to be here. This is the first of 2 events that we are having to acknowledge and celebrate our 30th year. So we hope that you all will also join us on October 12th at our annual fundraising gala, Homeward Bound, when we'll focus more on celebrating our 30 years as an organization with the partners and supporters who've helped us along the way. I really want to thank Here Together this evening for moderating the question and answer section of the program and for supporting the Housing Forum. We're likely to have more questions than we have time for, of course, so we'll do our very best to answer as many questions as we can. So now I have the honor of introducing this panel of leaders. Mayor Lacey Beaty from the city of Beaverton, thank you for being here. Dr. Marisa Zapata, who's the Associate Professor of Land Use Planning at Portland State University and Director of PSU's Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative. Thanks. Patricia Rojas, who's the Metro Housing Director. And Michael Yu, who is the owner of the Fubonn Shopping Center on Portland's East Side and a member of the Metro Tri-County Planning Body addressing supportive housing services. Thank you. And then I'm also very pleased to introduce Israel Bayer, who will be moderating this evening. He's the director of the North American Bureau of the International Network of Street Papers, and he also is the former director of our beloved Street Roots. So let's welcome him as well.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's an honor to share the stage with so many great people doing amazing things in our community. I have my own experience with homelessness and poverty, and I have the pleasure of working with individuals and organizations, not only in our community here, but around the country and around the world. And one of the most profound things that I think that I've learned over the years in my 2 decades of working on the homeless front is that, regardless of our political ideologies, whether we're Democrat or Republican, where people come from, whether it's the city or the country or the suburbs, or what people's experiences are in life, that, we can all agree at a very basic level that everyone deserves a safe and stable place to call home. It's very challenging in the world we live. It's hard not to be overwhelmed by everything that's going on. There's no question our communities are facing great challenges. Our country's facing great challenges. Our world is facing great challenges, from housing and homelessness to inflation to the cost of living to the climate crisis. The list goes on. So it's hard not only for the people on this stage doing the work, but also for yourselves in trying to understand and navigate a very complex system and a complex world. What's important is that, regardless of our differences, that we find a way to move forward in the same direction with the idea that home is the central place where all things start. And so all of us in this room represent a group of people that collectively believe that we can do better, or you wouldn't be here. So thank you all very much for being here. There's always going to be debate about strategy or tactics, our differences. But again, I believe that all of us in my many years of working, that we can come together regardless of our differences and move towards the idea that people deserve, again, a safe and stable place to call home. So again, thank you all for being here. We're going to jump right in, and we hope to have a really great and informative conversation tonight. So thank you for being here. So I'll just start with the first question for all the panelists. Why does this issue matter, and why should the issue of homelessness matter to our larger community?
I think for me, it goes back to what you said just now, which is that everybody deserves a safe, dignified place to live and to call home. And that we have so many people who don't have that at this point in time in a country that has so much wealth is so absolutely painful. And I think that it's so hard right now for people to lean into the fact that that is our reality, and that the more that we can work together and to push ourselves and one another, the more of a chance we have to actually be able to create that solution.
If everybody just wants to go around and do an answer.
Hello. Yeah, I agree with what Marisa said. A lot of, with everyone working together, especially with the Here Together Coalition, from where this started to where it's going now, just everyone having a seat at the table, trying to find a solution for the community. I'm born and raised in Portland, and this is where I've always called home. And to see my fellow community members struggling on the streets is something I do not like to see. And I think there's a better solution, a better way to help everyone forward.
Thanks for the question. Because the root causes of homelessness affect everybody. So we may think about homelessness as affecting people we see outside in a tent, in a car, somebody that we might know that's sleeping on somebody's couch. But the reality is that homelessness is just one of the most visceral and insidious forms of injustice, both economic and racial, in this country. And we're not alone when experiencing the impacts of homelessness. This is a national issue. And because these are national, deeply embedded systems of oppression that are playing out all around us every day. So I would just say we need to remember that everybody that we see had a home once. And the most important reason why it's so important for every single person to care is because this is your home. This is my home. And the home that we have is the home that you build. And it's a reflection of all of us. And so if we want to have a home that we feel everybody has a right to have a place to call home, we have to make that a reality.
I'm just taking in what everyone else is saying around me. Thanks for the question, Israel. I once read a couple weeks ago that growing up in poverty is like being punished for a crime you didn't commit. Having grown up in poverty, married someone who grew up in poverty, we both joined the United States Army for upward mobility. We were able to purchase our first home through the Montgomery GI Bill. We're both first generation college graduates. My husband's finishing his doctorate right now, which seemed a far cry from when he was homeless in high school in Prineville, Oregon. Not because of something he did, but because of his family and his situation and drugs and alcohol. A family in Prineville, Oregon that owned a hotel took my husband in and let him finish high school and gave him the opportunity for a future that never was in line with what he believed. Today, my husband is a proud U.S. Army military officer. He served 22 years this month. I think about the lives that he's touched because of one person. So when we think about homelessness in our household, we think of my 17-year-old husband looking for an opportunity to finish high school. And so the work that I do as the mayor is about dignity and restoring dignity to those that are experiencing something beyond their control. And everyone has a my husband in their life. That's what we have to remember.
Thank you so much. This next question is for Dr. Zapata. Given the historical impact of disinvestments in affordable housing during the past 4 decades and the rise of modern day homelessness, can you talk about the housing crisis and how it's having a devastating impact on our communities today?
So this is one of my favorite questions, which is basically, how did we get here in the modern era, right? So what is modern day homelessness and why are we here? And I know the answer I'm supposed to always give, which is in the 1970s, we had a significant rollback in the funding that happened in affordable housing, and we stopped investing in the same way with mental health care. That is the answer I'm always supposed to give. It is also true. But I think that when we, and going back to what Patricia was saying about the root causes, we can't be surprised by what we have today, because homelessness and homelessness for particularly certain groups of people has been set up since the beginning of the country. So if you think about it, no one Black was homeless in this country before 1619. No one who was indigenous was homeless in this country before 1492. That's the year, right? Latinos weren't homeless in this country because we didn't exist as we exist today. And Asian Americans were not homeless because they were not here in the same way they are today. We set up a constitution that framed housing as a private property. Only certain people were allowed to own it. Other people were considered property. And so when we look at who owns homes today and who has access to housing stability, we see the same patterns repeated. We see massive disparities for people of color in terms of homelessness. Again, this is a foregone conclusion. It is not shocking that though African Americans are only 13% of the population in the nation, they are 40% of those experiencing homelessness. We have been in motion for this not since the 1970s, but since the foundation. In the 1920s, we did make some pivots around trying to invest more in public housing, but we did not invest in a social housing program that would have actually given us the kind of housing we needed to provide housing for all. Over that time, and I'll put on my land use planning hat, land use planners and real estate have worked hand in hand in order to secure housing and property rights for a selected group of people. We have had moments of time across the decades since then where we have gone further in terms of supporting people and access to housing, right? So GI Bill, huge. I am a second generation PhD, actually. My father was one of the 2 of 7 to graduate from high school in his family, and he went on to get a PhD. And that was because there was a moment in policy where his father was able to get a job at an Air Force base and was able to access a home. And those policies aligned for about 5 years, and then they ended. In the 70s, we did see this roll back even further in public housing, but it does not imply that we actually did it to any real scale. We simply did it better than we did starting in the 70s and 80s. And now we have a lot of policy in place that makes it very hard to fund public housing. We are very focused on market solutions to housing. The idea that everything must be done with a market partner. There is absolutely no market solution that will pay for housing to be built at 0 to 30% median household income. And in some places like the Portland region, that income level goes up even higher. It's very simple, right? Why would a person who is trying to make profit buy materials and pay people to build housing if someone else cannot buy it? And so without an investment in public housing, we continue to see the issues that we see today. That's actually my time. So I'll just say the other kind of key things that we see happening around housing is the continued real estate investment portfolios, right? So many of us don't realize that our retirement accounts are actually tied up in real estate investment. We have private outside developers buying up housing, and we simply do not have enough of it.
Thank you so much. The next question is talking about some of the things, some of the solutions and things we're doing right. What are some of the things we are getting right on the homeless and housing front? And what possibilities do we see to unite our entire community behind providing housing as a public infrastructure in order to support a healthy society? Mayor Beaty, do you want to start?
Super easy question. So, I think we're doing a lot of things right. I think sometimes what we see right in front of us is chaos, and what we see is a humanitarian crisis. As the mayor of Beaverton, I often remind people it's not just a Portland problem. These problems exist here in Tiger. They exist in Beaverton. They exist in Hillsborough. I can only talk about my city and the work that we're doing, but we have put homelessness as one of our top priorities to address. When I became mayor in 2020, there was no homeless plan. I was sworn into office and was like, hey, there's this problem. Maybe we should go out and deal with it. I came from public health. I had a good idea of what it meant to serve people where they were. But there was no plan for us to take over. We were still dealing with COVID. We were still dealing with the fallout. We had made a lot of rules about eviction to hopefully keep people off the road, sleeping in tents, and it exploded faster than we could solve it. But in Beaverton, we raised the money for the first year-round shelter to be opened in Washington County, because to be a good partner in the region means we're part of the solution as well. We opened safe parking programs across 4 or 5 sites in our city, including governments that host it. Our partners at Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District opened a site. Local churches opened a site. We tend a lot to think that it's the church community that has to solve this issue. And having been in the Army and lived all over the country, there's not that church community that exists here. So government has to step in and do some of this work. Our city hosted a site. The average person using that parking in our city was a 70-year-old woman. Think about that. Your mom, my mom's 70, looking for a safe place to park and rest. And so what we've done wrong is treat homelessness like one size fits all. What we've done in our city is look at it as a spectrum. We have the highest rate of teen homelessness in the state. We helped Home Plate Youth Services, Washington County's only nonprofit addressing housing instability with young people. We helped raise the money so they can open their day center in downtown Beaverton. We're not shying away and putting people experiencing homelessness on the outside of our community. We're putting them in the core where our values are and making sure that young people know they can succeed. We have one of the first things I did when I was elected almost 10 years ago was push our city to operate a severe weather shelter. We didn't even have one. 10 years ago, we weren't even thinking about people being in temporary sheltering. So really, when you think about from 2020 to 2023, what we've been able to accomplish as the city is pretty remarkable for a city that had no plan. And government, as you know, I don't know if you know this is the first time you're hearing it, I'm sorry, we're really slow at addressing problems. I know, it's a shocker. So I just want to put that in context because I think we get this idea that government doesn't work. Government works, and we're working well together. And in Washington County, and I saw our chair, Catherine Harrington, join the room too. Under her leadership, she's pushing us to work together across city boundaries, not thinking about it as an individual problem and really taking that helm and that mantle of we're in it together. So, I get frustrated because we focus on so much on what's going wrong, but also look at some of the awesome things we're doing. And, housing is just expensive to build. So if anyone has any rich uncles, I'm open.
I want to pick up right where you left off. There are things that are working, and one of the things that is working better than it has been, as far as I can tell, ever before in our community, is working together across jurisdictions with multiple partners, nonprofits, counties, cities, metro. And that's one of the first times I've seen this level of collaboration ever in our community. So not only are we valuing partnership and collaboration, but we're also investing in it. So the 2018 Affordable Housing Bond, bringing in $650 million, has resulted in an infrastructure of collaboration and partnerships with those very partners that are yielding units every day of affordable housing. So we set out to build 3,900. We project we'll reach 4,700. And that was made possible because of the power of partnership, of leverage, of looking for opportunity that we can bring in together that may have not have existed if it was just yourself or just one jurisdiction. So the recognition that we can't go it alone and that the status quo that we've been kind of working in isn't going to work. It is not working, and we have to do something different. Another example of that partnership is through the Supportive Housing Services Program. $2.5 billion over 10 years is the largest per capita investment in the history of this country. And to me, that is this community saying we will lead and vote by our values. What I was saying earlier about building the community that you want to be starts with those types of actions. And every person who voted for that, every person who's doing this work is part of that solution and part of that future of building that community that you want to see. But with that work, we also are building an infrastructure of 3 counties working together with nonprofits. Over 3,000 individuals have been housed who were formerly homeless in just a year and a half. We have a 10-year program, and we're already making significant progress. Over 10,000 households have received eviction prevention services. So for as much as you think that, not you personally, as people may think that what we're doing isn't working, imagine what it would look like if we didn't have those investments. if the folks that were able to hold on to their housing weren't able to hold on to it to begin with. So there are some really great things happening, all of it rooted and grounded in that we are better if we work together. And I would just say there's also some innovation. So we now have a local long-term rent assistance program that is regional. So folks are able to access housing for those folks who really, really need it, are able to attain housing stability with the help of this resource. So there are things that are happening that have never happened before. Counties are procuring together, which is like blows my mind. For those of you who know anything about government, that's never happened. So
we move fast and we
right?
work together.
Exactly, it's happening. So there are some really great partnerships, and I think that is very optimistic for me.
I probably come from a little different perspective. I don't work in the public sector. I've been in the private sector my whole life. So getting the ability to listen and kind of learn from everyone, again, all the way from Here Together to the Tri-City Planning Board that I sit on, it's been an eye-opening experience. And you see how government works. Sometimes it is a little slow, but it's moving in the right direction. And we're building the foundational pieces that we need to stand up this program. We are in year 2 of the SHS dollars coming in. We stood up long-term rental assistance. We're working on master leases, and like Patricia said, working across counties. Homelessness doesn't end at the county line of Multnomah County or Clackamas or anywhere else. We really do need to come up with a solution that will work region-wide. And that's probably the one thing that stands out to me the most, is we are functioning as a region to try to come up with solutions. One good idea from Washington County gets implemented in Multnomah County. We're listening to Multnomah County about how they're dealing with issues. So we're not reinventing the wheel over and over again. And that's probably a lot of the things that stand out to me of things that do work. But we didn't get into this crisis overnight. We're short in the state of like 120,000 housing units. The housing bond has done a great job to get us started, but we need everyone involved. We need the private sector to also start building. What incentives do we need to do? What does government need to do to streamline the process to get more housing built? Affordable housing, market rate housing, all types, single family homes to high density buildings. We just need to, housing people is going to be the solution to ending our homeless problem. And we got to get the inventory up to meet our communities so we can meet the needs of our state.
So I'm going to go back to that number that we just heard. We're short something like 120,000 housing units in the state. And then say that in 2022, for the HUD definition of homelessness, that's the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, 6,600 people were estimated to be experiencing homelessness in the Tri-County area. And I think that the magnitude of difference between the number of people experiencing homelessness based on a narrow definition of homelessness and the number of housing units that we have is in part why so many people are frustrated and not really being able to see the amazing work that people are doing in our communities. I think some of the things that have been really powerful that I've seen at the state level. Does anybody work at the state? All right, no one's fessing up. Did you know that no one's in charge of homelessness at the state? No one's in charge. No department was actually assigned to be in charge of homelessness. And so to see how quickly they have stood up an interagency council on homelessness. I've been in some wonderful collaborations with the Department of Land Conservation and Development, who handles planning, with OHCS, which is Oregon Community and Housing Services. So very deliberate attempts to already work across the departments to recognize that developing housing, making housing happen, the funding streams that go with housing really do require a concerted effort to partner and work together. Obviously, people have already talked about SHS. Again, I mean, I think you have to go back to these things that are working in the face of how long it is taking to get us to where we need to be. And I mean, I cried the night that SHS went through, because that and the housing bonds, that is how we know and we show our care for our community members. Even though we know it is just a fraction of what we will need long term, I know that's hard to sit with, but it is incredibly powerful. The last thing I will say that I think has been remarkable is that Multnomah County, and then following with Metro, have adopted a different definition of homelessness than HUD. And that definition includes people who are doubled up, living unsafely with other people because they have no other choice. And I think that has just opened up the possibilities for thinking about homelessness as all encompassing, and understanding that we're not going to actually end homelessness or resolve homelessness for people if we don't actually acknowledge their housing state.
Thank you so much. Given everything we've talked about, can folks maybe talk about some of the challenges that they're facing real time on the issue, and how we're working to overcome them? And maybe, Michael, maybe you could talk about what it means to engage and leverage the private sector to become more involved in the issue, and some of the challenges, but also some of the things that have been great that you've been able to experience, and maybe some of just the everyday things that the public is very frustrated with the reality of street homelessness, but understanding that we need a long runway. We have a long runway with the idea of the bonds and the homeless service measure, and other investments in infrastructure that we're trying to create. I guess, can people just give us some examples of some everyday challenges that you're facing, and then how you're overcoming them?
I think it's just in general, it's not just homelessness that's affecting our community. It goes back to kind of public safety and just the livability of our city. There's just a lot of things that we need to correct and modify. Businesses are struggling. Being on the east side, Walmart just closed. We just had a lot of things going on. There's another grocer that's going to Zebra Market. They're closing their stores as well. There's a lot of things going on, and sometimes just for me personally, I think we just need to address some of these problems, and there does need to be some enforcement of laws to get our public safety and things going back. And that this isn't just it's not just dealing with homelessness, and I don't want to say homelessness is responsible for all of this, but just us as a community, when we talk about one thing, it can't just be this or that. We got to kind of do everything at the same time. So from a business standpoint, those are some of the issues we're seeing. From what I've been dealing with this TCPB, it's difficult to find people to work, not only in the private sector, but in the public sector. Finding enough qualified service providers to do the work has been difficult. We are tasked with trying to help so many individuals who are chronically homeless, living on the streets, and we just don't have enough personnel to deal with the problem. We don't have enough space right now. There's just so many challenges that we're facing. Are we addressing it? Yes. But we got to work with a little bit more of a sense of urgency in our community to resolve these issues. And it's not just left to a few people trying to move the city in the right direction. It takes all of us. That's why, I'm happy to see so many people in the room come in to listen to it and see what you guys each can do to participate and help us move our city and our region in the right direction.
We're all friends, right? This is open, honest conversation. People want simple solutions to complex problems. I don't say that tongue in cheek. I'm the level of government that's held accountable for this problem. Most people have no idea who their state rep is, who their senator is. They know who their mayor is. They find me in the grocery store. They find me when I'm dropping my daughter off at school or taking a walk in the park. We're not like the state government that's about to release a historic kicker of money back to taxpayers. We're $10 million short in our Beaverton budget this year. That's about 100 employees for me. So when I'm trying to solve these complex issues, spending $1 million a year out of our budget to clean up bio waste off the streets is not something that our tax system was designed to do. Spending $10 million on a homeless shelter wasn't something taxpayers of Beaverton could shoulder the burden to do it. And so we're trying to, by the law, we can only raise our property taxes 3% a year. So we don't wait for the forecast at city government to be like, how much money is coming this year? We're like, holy crap, we know how much little money is coming and the demand on our resources is high. And so when we're talking about solving issues at the local level, and even you said it, we got to get our city back in order. Like the cities are held responsible and have the least amount of resources to address this problem. It's not all doom and gloom though. All 241 mayors in this state spent the summer working on a package to go to the legislature with demonstrated need for our communities. Because while our cities are unique and different, our problems really aren't. We're having homeless issues in every community from Coos Bay all the way down to Roseburg. We know as mayors on the ground what it takes to solve this problem. What we need is a state legislature that recognizes that and invests in cities. The president did a historic investment with ARPA, American Rescue Act money, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors compelled him to give money directly to cities to solve the problem. And we are really good at it. And I'm going to use cities and counties a little interchangeably here as well. Counties do this same similar work that cities do. But I know that nobody knows who my county commissioner is. She's not in here, but again, they know who the mayor is. If our president can recognize the power of cities, and by the way, 50% of the president's cabinet is mayors, because we know how to get things done. So what I want you to know is like we're trying to fix these complex problems, but when you call the mayor to yell because your permit hasn't gone through, because I don't have enough staff, that there's somebody sleeping in your doorstep, that's all I think about. I wake up every day thinking about my community and what it takes to solve this problem. So if you know who your state rep and senator is, do me a favor and leave and said, Mayor Beaty said to invest in cities. We need our $125 million we're asking for.
So on the challenges conversation, there are many. I will just say all of the root causes are still there. They're not gone, right? So we still don't have enough housing. We still have increasing rents. We still have flat wages. Now we have inflation. Racism is still rampant. Like all of the things that have gotten us here are still here. So I'll just say we have some much, much bigger work to do if we really want to see this change. But as far as the regional side of things go, and like what I would highlight at this point as one of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing at Metro in implementing the supportive housing services work or the affordable housing bond is a capacity crisis. We are in a capacity crisis, and I'll just say it's not unique to this body of work or to our region or state. It is a national hiring crisis. Everybody is having a hard time hiring folks and retaining folks. And part of that is because we need to pay equitable wages. It's hard to hire people to do this work which is often re-traumatizing for folks when they can make probably the same amount of money with less trauma at Dutch Bros. So we have some work to do on wage equity issues in our community, but the capacity issue is real. And if we don't have folks to do the work doesn't get done. Every person who gets into housing has another human being who's built a relationship with them, who's helped them and walked that journey with them the entire way. And so this work is about people, working with people. It is not a robot or a machine. It is not magic. It is people doing the hard work of changing and transforming this community and transforming lives. So hiring folks has been really, really challenging. The impacts of this pandemic are still being seen. We're still in it. It's not gone. And it's going to be a very long time as we see the effects of this pandemic emerge. the economic impacts, the social impacts. Our nonprofits that are doing this work, who have done this work through this pandemic, are tired. They have fronted so much to keep people safe. And I'll just hats off to all the folks who did this work, because they did a phenomenal job keeping people alive and safe during this pandemic. So I think we have a lot of challenges. Capacity is a real issue for our community. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to find some ways to get to some wage equity and addressing some of the other inequities that are kind of exasperating some of these issues that we're seeing in the community.
Thank you. I realize we're running a little bit behind, but I just want to thank everybody for their patience and hope people are enjoying the conversation. Really briefly, can people just say what gives you hope when you wake up in the morning? And what are a few words of advice to people in the audience engaging in this issue?
I mean, what gives me hope is that people who are without housing continue to live their lives, and that they show up every day and ask for help or have friends or say hi. I mean, I can't imagine the circumstances that so many people are living in. And yet the number of people who are so excited to have a conversation. I mean, I'm really grumpy without my coffee. And yet there is just so much humanity out there. I mean, that is, for me, the hope, right? It's that people will continue to survive and persevere despite the obstacles that are in front of them. What was the other part? That's it. Great. Love it. I'm done.
I echo everything that was just said. What gives me hope is we all came together as a community to pass this historic SHS funding to deal with the crisis we all see in the street, because we said that's not Oregon, that's not Portland, that's not the region. We see our community members struggling on the streets, and we said there's a better path forward. And we're doing the work right now to, again, foundationally build that infrastructure that's going to be, it's going to take more than 10 years. But I think this first 10 years, we're going to see so much progress as being made that I hope we become the model that all other regions look at when they have a crisis similar to what we're dealing with right now.
For me, what gives me hope every day is being able to do the work that I do with the partners that we have. Our county partners, our city partners, the nonprofits, everybody that does this work because they care, because, sorry, a little emotionally thin today, because we care. And we, again, going back to the concept of building the community we want to see. You don't do that alone. And we're all working from these values of everybody deserves a home. And we're building that together in a totally different way. That gives me hope every day.
That was deep. I'm a proud U.S. Army veteran. I'm a patriot. I have a lot of patriotism and love for this country. That's not to wipe away all of what we got here. We're an imperfect country. But in America, things are still possible. My husband could go from homeless to doctor and own a house, and our daughter's life and our one on the way is forever changed. But I don't want to give you the illusion that it was bootstrapped. We joined the military. We paid a price. We served in combat. So we know how to make systems work in this country. We know that the GI Bill unleashed prosperity it had never seen in past generations. Why don't we take some of that American can-do, like we've done with past GI Bills, and open it to a wider audience, do civil service, do other things. We know how to do it, and we know how to make it work in America. And I still have hope in this perfectly flawed country that when we come together, we can do amazing and great things.
Thank you so much. We're going to go. We're going to go to our Q&A. We have Angela Martin with Here Together. We have probably time for 2 questions, potentially. Do you want to ask those questions?
Yeah, and if folks, am I on? If folks have questions, I do think we have collection ability. So raise your hand, we'll get your question written down. But one question we get at every forum, and Mayor Beaty, I'd love to put this to you, is how do you respond to that person in the grocery store who comes up and they're just frustrated? They're angry, they're frustrated. How do we respond? And can you help any one of us who has that person in our life understand how to respond and be not dismissive of their frustration, but listen to it and put it to good use?
I'm not always great at it, but I would say responding in kind, because people are often searching for what they feel like is an obvious solution. Like, why don't you just do this? And it's really hard. I'm pretty sarcastic not to be like, oh, geez, I didn't think about that. Thank you so much for telling me to solve homeless. I will go home and write it on the back of a napkin. I always just tell the story of complexity, right? We broke ground on an affordable housing project in South Beaverton that nearly got off the rails with inflation and $18 million. I had to work with our state treasurer, state rep. We had to compel the state to give us money. The city had to buy the property. Metro had to come in and help fund the project. Washington County had to help with regulations. And I tell that story because every level of government touched that affordable housing project to get the 86 units off the ground. And when you talk to people about complexity, I think they don't always like it, but I think they start to come around and see it and just realize that people are living their everyday life and they're not thinking about what us in this room are thinking about. They're thinking about taking their kids to school. They're thinking about their jobs. They're thinking about their car payment. And if you're a mom like me, you're thinking about, are we out of bread in 3 days? Who did the laundry? Did the dog get outside today? Then you drive by and you see something that you think government isn't working. So the first person you see, you just explode on. I'm like, why isn't government working? So we have to calm down and remember that not everyone is educated in the spot of empathy that we are. So I try to respond in kind. They don't always respond in kind back. But I go home and get on my Peloton and fight another day.
This next question has to do with some of the innovations to close that gap. So I'll let one of you decide who's the best to respond to this. Dr. Zapata, perhaps you. So this question was specific to what are we doing with land banking to increase affordable housing, but let's expand it. What are the innovations out there to get that 120,000 units that we need in the state?
I don't know. Are there any innovations? No, I'm kidding. So yeah, some places are doing some land banking. I wouldn't say it's widespread, but that is an opportunity to be thinking about how to secure land and be able to build affordable housing at a lower rate. I think it is looking at zoning codes, right? So the land use processes, the development processes. I moved here from Ohio, and when I heard how much the Bureau of Department, the city of Portland was charging for a basic development fee, I just about had a heart attack. So really thinking about how to revoke those and remove those. I think the biggest innovation in terms of being able just to get to our unit count was House Bill 2001, which is what has eradicated I'm not supposed to say eradicated, which has invited us to have the opportunity to have higher density development on properties that were previously zoned for only single family, right? Okay, we got rid of single family zoning in this state, and that was amazing. We're the first state to have done that. And it is bold leadership to say we are getting rid of the gold standard of housing development in this country. You can still have your single family home, but we can also now have duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, which is the number one way that we're going to increase density and increase the goal to meet that housing. Now, in terms of the innovations to actually meet the affordability goal, I don't think we've really gotten there, right? Because there is so much money that is needed. The true innovation will be thinking about how we get rid of the kicker, right? We actually use the kicker to buy a massive amount of housing, not deal with all of these complicated financing issues, and then being able just to make that happen faster. That's the innovation that I am waiting for.
Thank you. Do I have time for a couple more? All right. Patricia, perhaps you can answer this one. Housing doesn't know geographic bounds, and we've all talked about how it is a problem in every community in our state. And yet, why does it look so much worse on the ground in Portland? What is happening?
That is such a great question. And I'm sure many of my colleagues here on the stage have this conversation all the time. Because people will often say, like, what you're doing is not working. I still have in my neighborhood the tent or a new tent or whatnot. And, at the end of the day, when I talk about how many people have been able to access housing, most of which had been homeless for extended periods of time, most of which have at least one disability and zero to no income. It's transformational when you think about that. So it's not to say that things aren't working, but when you look at the projection of rents going up another 14% this year, and how much rents have gone up during just the pandemic alone, and how many people weren't able to work during that time period. And we talk about the root causes of homelessness continuing to exist and exacerbate. It's really a different issue. The reality is so long as we have folks becoming homeless or entering homelessness, we're going to see what we're seeing, right? So there are different issues. Ending homelessness means a person is no longer homeless. They are in housing now. But if for every person that that is able to access housing, 2 or 3 more have lost their housing because of rent increases, we have a real problem. And you're going to see what you're seeing. And that is why we're seeing what we're seeing. Again, if we've prevented 9,000 people from becoming homeless with this measure, like what would the community look like if that hadn't been there? So I think really what we have is a challenge of, again, addressing the root causes, which is different than helping somebody who's currently homeless to access housing. I like to tell folks that what we have, a lot of what we're talking about is like the emergency room, right? Crisis, person needs help right now. But that's not where people find their health, like regular health. That's in the community. That's your community health side of things. That's where you go to your primary care provider. That's not what we're talking about right now, right? So we need to build that. And that means helping people stay housed to begin with.
Michael, this next one is for you. It's a question about your experience as a business owner, a business leader, being at a table with a bunch of nonprofit service providers. The question is, what did you learn, and what do other businesses, what role could they be playing in this on this issue?
You guys trained me well at Here Together to sit in a coalition with a bunch of, for me, I probably have the most diverse perspective of people up here. But one things I try to do is listen. There's a lot of things I don't have experience as mayor working at Metro or, dealing with housing. So the only thing I can do is kind of sit back, listen to see what the true root causes are of what we're facing. Yeah, if I don't see this every day and I wasn't a part of the coalition, I would probably be the person bumping into Mayor Beaty and, the Safeway and going like, why aren't you doing anything? But seeing the perspective, seeing how government works, seeing how service providers work, seeing the issues they're dealing with. We all deal with issues in our lives and we all live in our bubbles. And until you expand that and see all the issues that people are dealing with in their daily lives, you don't really see the whole picture. So one of the things by joining Here Together in the TCPB is I think it broadened my horizons a little bit. And I always try to tell my friends the same thing, that if they're doing the same complaints, I say, get involved. This is our community. This is what we make, what we want out of our community. You can either pack up and leave, or you can stay and fight for what you want. I'm born and raised in Portland. This is my home. I'm not leaving. This is where I want to be. This is where I want to raise my family. But we need to make some changes so my daughters will have that same feeling that they want to return back to Portland if they go to college somewhere else or they go away, that they consider Portland home. And I've always considered Portland home, even though I did go away for college, but I came back because this is the community I wanted to be in, this community I wanted to raise my family in.
Looks like we have time for 2 more questions, and it's great because I'm going to combine 2 of them. Homelessness obviously isn't a single thing. It's not a same experience for any one individual. And so we have questions here about how are there a difference in treatment or solutions for people who are chronically homeless versus they just became homeless yesterday? And the second part of that question is, what kind of housing options exist in that continuum? What is transitional housing? How do we do it with dignity? So that's a big question, but it's asking to speak to kind of the range of solutions.
Well, I'll just give you an example. So Beaverton has a municipal court. One of the things in the pandemic, when we started to see this exploding humanitarian crisis, I brought our department heads together and said, what do I need to go champion for the city? And our municipal judge says, we need a mental health diversion court. So I went and found $1.1 million for her to start that diversion court, because so many people with mental health services and homeless in Beaverton were ending up in front of our judge. She sent me a photo last week from one of the 30 mental health patients we helped this year. And on the bottom of the photo, it said, I can lock my door. And it was a photo of the front door. For the first time in 10 years, this guy that went through our 12-month diversion program had the ability to lock a door. Think about that from a dignity standpoint. How many times do you check your own door in your own house? You know, if you're like me, it's probably 100 times. So I think it's just like this level of like, not everyone is in the same storm, but not everyone's in the same boat. And so how do we start breaking that apart, that those experiencing mental health services need different needs out of our system. Those that have drug and alcohol abuse system have different needs out of our system. You know, Beaverton's exploding teen homelessness needs something different. They need a place to stay to graduate high school. And when we try to do things like solve homelessness, we forget to take those meaningful first steps. And when we start taking enough meaningful first steps, we're able to put things together. And so I often don't tell our staff, we're going to solve homelessness in 2023. I say, what's the first step? What do we do next? How do we take another step after that? Then it's easier for staff to get around. Then creative juices are flowing, because we tend to treat business owners like they're bad because they don't want people sleeping in front of their doorway, or that every developer, I know this is a shocker too, makes so much money and they're just like milking the system. We know that's not true. And so how do we start making things easy for people to understand and taking those first meaningful steps?
So can I jump in on this one? Because I mean, as an academic, you're always looking for like typologies and ways to aggregate everything into categories. And one of the things that I have a very hard time with is this, it's everyone's individualized and needs different things. Everyone needs a place to live. Everyone needs structured housing if they want it. Everyone also needs relationships with human beings. And it could be that meeting someone and developing a relationship may make someone want to leave a tent and try to live inside. It could be that someone is willing to try something different on their journey to living inside. There's this whole myth that everyone who's living outside doesn't want to live inside. Sure, there are some people, although often if you have that longer conversation, you discover that people don't want to move inside because they've been failed by poorly managed apartment complexes, painful eviction processes, right? And so I don't want to diminish the fact that some people don't necessarily want to move inside tomorrow, but fundamentally we are talking about people needing housing, not tiny pod villages, not motels. People do not need to transition in general. They might decide that that is the right path for them short term. But at the end of the day, people need a place to live and they need humans to connect with who can help them.
Can I jump? Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
Is there time to jump in on this one? Okay, great. So, there's, 150 people in here perhaps. And I think there's a significant diversity of experiences of what you need. I'm pretty sure, folks have a house. Some of you have a house, some of you have an apartment. You have kids, some of you don't. Like, you're all different. And that's that's the same with folks who are experiencing homelessness. Like, they're experiencing something, they're not that thing, right? So we have to be thoughtful of when we are actually homogenizing a group of people and like kind of stereotyping them. And so we need, just how we need and want options for how we want to live our life, so does everybody else. And so when we're talking about experiencing homelessness and how do we end that homelessness for folks, we also need to have options for what that looks like. So for some folks who have experienced chronic homelessness, they might find permanent supportive housing to be a great option. Where, for example, a lot of folks who are in that population have a disability, or at least one. When we did the point in time count, we find that they have multiple disabilities. They have oftentimes aren't fixed incomes. Folks, as we heard, like there are folks that our population is aging. And so folks are out there 65, 70 years old. We're not talking about folks that are going to go out and get a job tomorrow, right? Never mind the fact that they've experienced a lot of trauma. So they need support, which is ongoing rent. They need a place to call home, a unit of housing, and they need somebody to help them access maybe what is their medical health care or other social or health supports that they need to keep them into housing. So that's permanent supportive housing. But not everybody needs that. Some people may just have lost a job, they got sick, they lost a loved one. Any number of circumstances could lead somebody to experience homelessness. It is not about the person. It is about being a human being. If we have the big one tomorrow, I guarantee you there will be a lot of people that are experiencing homelessness. And it's no different here. So maybe a person might need something called rapid rehousing, which is to get them into a unit, an apartment, house something, some form of permanent housing, and some short-term support, 6 months up to 2 years, and then they don't need any more of that. But the point is that we need to be able to offer folks, like meet people where they're at and like recognize the uniqueness of their experience and help folks access housing the way they need to access housing.
Thank you so much. I'll try to leave everyone tonight with a handful of things to think about. When we think about people experiencing homelessness, it's really important to understand that homelessness is not a permanent condition. It's something that people experience over a period of time based upon a broken system. And so oftentimes we have emotional responses to what's happening on our streets. You see somebody having a mental health crisis. You see somebody struggling with an addiction issue. You see some pretty unsightly things sometimes. And our emotional responses in our brain don't always trigger us to think and step back and say, well, this person is experiencing this suffering because of the high cost of housing, because the lack of affordable housing, because of systemic racism in our society. And I just challenge all of you to think about, as you're working in your daily lives and going about everything you're doing, is to really take a step back and understand that 1 million people that will experiencing homelessness in America this year didn't wake up last weekend and all decide to choose to become homeless just to make our world complex. And it's really important, some of the best ways we can change people's hearts and minds. Let's not forget that the Portland region voted for 3 homeless and affordable housing ballot initiatives with strong support. We still believe that strong support is there. There may be a loud chorus of provocateurs and people who say we're not doing things, but the reality is people at a very fundamental core believe in the idea that human beings should deserve a safe and affordable place to call home. We still have that support in our community. We have to garner that support. We have to continue on with that support. In ways that we can do this is by having conversations with your family, with your peers at work, with people at your Thanksgiving dinner table or at Christmas. Oftentimes we think of homelessness and solving the problem in a way that is a one-time investment. If we build a bridge across a river, we're going to solve X, Y, and Z. When in reality, housing is no different than our first responders, than our parks, our education systems. It's going to take a series of ongoing investments to be able to support the idea of a healthy society. And if we can shift our consciousness away from thinking that this is a one-time investment or issue or program or nonprofit or whatever it might be to solve a much larger complex problem, we can begin to think about this stuff in ways that, like, how do we have a more healthy society? How do we create these ongoing investments? How do we continue to work towards these goals that create the environment and the world in which we want to live in? And so I have just a couple things, like if you can get your phones out and write it down. Policy Link, Race Forward, Community Change. I believe Policy Link just put together a really great housing justice narrative that was just published, I believe, last week or the week before, that talks about ways that you can engage your community in the housing conversation. So do that. We want you to vote for housing. We want you to care for housing. We want you to understand that we all collectively can do good in our community, regardless of the haters. And we really appreciate all your work and support. Thank you very much for